Hey there, it's Keith Hayden, the digital novelist, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Novelist podcast. I'm so happy that you've joined me today, this morning, this evening, this afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. I'd like to remind you that on my website, I've got the Digital Novelist Explorer package that I've been putting out, and it's pretty amazing. I've got a 7-day email course that'll help you get started. I've got my new novelist work kit. That's a curated collection of resources that I personally used, only stuff that I actually used to become a better novelist over the last several years. You're going to get that. You're also going to get a discount to the digital novelist starter kit, which is included with Gates of Okinawa, my current supernatural horror novel that I'm working on. And then you also get access to my story generator. You're going to get all this for free. Head over to my website, keithhayden.net, and you can go check it out. It's Saturday when I'm recording this. And so I wanted to do a little more of a personal episode today of the podcast and talk about my writing process, specifically what I do during each session. Because, I'm a military guy. I've grew up military. I grew up in a military town. I served in the United States military for many years, and I'm still very close and very connected to the U.S. military community. And so through that, there's always been a level of discipline that I've had about anything that I do. And I had this pre-military, and just being in that environment just made it stronger over the years. And so every time I sit down to write, I have a specific flow, and I want to share mine to get you to think about yours, because a lot of writers don't have a specific practice. And so that makes it harder for them to actually sit down and do the work of finishing the story. The story won't write itself, and you can't write it all in one session. So you have to kind of have these micro sessions, whether they're 25 minutes long or 5 minutes or 5 hours, depending on how you roll. Then you're going to want this process. So today I wanted to talk about my process. I'll start at the beginning of how I do things. So typically, when I sit down to write, I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro method. If you're not familiar with Pomodoro, it's essentially working in 25-minute blocks, taking 5-minute breaks. And the traditional Pomodoro is you do 4 of these blocks and then you take a longer break, like an hour or so in between before you get back to work. And it's very popular and common among students for studying, but I use it all the time because I have a lot of stuff that I'm into, and I've been using it for years now, and I swear by it because it just breaks things up. It's allows me to get into that deep work, and I don't get distracted as easily. I feel like I can do anything for 25 minutes straight without getting distracted. And I'm not too bad about getting distracted with things, but it just helps me stay focused on that one thing. What's helped me immensely over the years is putting on a timer. And I know some people don't like this because it gives them more stress and anxiety. It recalls back to school days of when you had time tests and you had to do all these things. And it really gives a bad feeling for some people. But for me, it gives me structure, knowing that, okay, I only have 25 minutes to work on this. So I want to maximize those 25 minutes. I want to be only writing, in this case, for my novel. So how I'll start each session is, let's say I'm going to do it for 25 minutes. I'm going to write for 25 minutes. What I start with is actually, before I even start writing, I will pull off a book from from one of my mini books on my shelf, and I will open up one of these. I have a stack of about 25 different books currently that are related to the story that I'm writing. This is Gates of Okinawa. It's a lingua fiction story, and I'll talk about lingua fiction more in another episode, but essentially it's a story that includes language in a dynamic way. And these types of stories aren't I've seen stories that incorporate language, but they're not as intentional. This is very intentional use of language, putting it in there to for atmosphere, for environment, and to help readers get more immersed in the story. And I figured since the story takes place in Japan, it should have some Japanese in it, and that's the way it's going. But anyway, so these 25 books, I will randomly select one of the books. You know, I like randomness, and I will open up to a random page of the book, and I'll just read one page. And that book may be in English, Japanese. I even have a Spanish book, a couple of Spanish books in there. And what this does is it gives me kind of it's a it's a spark of inspiration for when I'm going to write in that session. And I do this before I start the timer. I don't time this part because sometimes it depends on the density, I'll say, of whatever book or page that I choose to read. And I'll just read the page. And sometimes it helps me. I have books on writing craft, I have books on storytelling, I have books, just other novels that are related to the subject matter of what I'm writing. This is a horror novel, so I have other horror novels. I have a couple of Japanese books that I picked up when I was over in Okinawa that are about ghost stories that take place over there. It's really just a spread of ideas to get me started. And sometimes the books don't really have any they're not directly useful to what I'm writing or the part of the story that I'm writing, but it just gets me going. I found it's easier for me than going in completely cold, and it opens up to serendipity of running into something that, oh, that would be a cool idea to implement here if I read it in another novel, or this is an interesting use of language, whether it's Japanese or English, that I wasn't aware of, and that would be cool to implement. So it just it's something that I recommend. Maybe you try it and just see, because many of us, especially if you're listening to this podcast, you do write fiction or you want to write fiction, then you probably read fiction too. You probably have your favorite books around you, or if you have access to them, or maybe you can even find clips or things online. It doesn't matter. But I found this is a very good practice. So I start my sessions with this. After I read the page, then it's on to the writing session. I have a timer. I use the app. What's the name of this app that I use? I use it every day and I don't even know the name of it. The app is called Focus Meter. It's the Focus Meter app, and this is an app specifically designed. I love the simplicity of the app. I'm not sponsored by them at all, but um, it's just I've been using this app for years now, and it's a free, very simple app, but all it does is allow you to turn on a timer that's 25 minutes, and you can set it down to 5 minutes. You can have it longer than 25 minutes as long as you want, however you're going to do it. And I use this app, turn it on, and I get writing. The writing sessions are everybody writes differently. Some people are fans of just dump your ideas onto the page, deal with it later in editing. And I know they tell you not to edit as you write. And I've tried to do both. I've tried to do the strict dump. I've tried to do the line by line. And my style, I tend to favor a hybrid of get my ideas down, but make sure they're coherent and clean enough to where editing is, I'm not just gonna do it all on editing. Part of the reason for that is I don't really like editing. I've gotten better at it and I've got it more of a taste of it now, but I prefer to get just something that's actually usable. Some people will just dump stuff on the page and then only a small portion of it is usable. I'm like, what the hell is that? I feel like that doesn't work for me. Maybe it works for you, but it doesn't work for me. So I'll just start writing. And one of the things I've gotten better at, and you get better at this as you write, is that voice that tells you that this is stupid. This isn't how, this isn't like Steinbeck or Rowling or or Hemingway, like you equate your writing to what you read because that's what you know. And first of all, their shit has been edited and polished, and who knows what their first draft looked like, right? So you're writing your first draft. Give yourself some slack. Second of all, is that just may be your style. And maybe instead of fighting that urge and being like, it's not like enough like X, Y famous author that you read or author that you like, maybe it's, I need to lean more into what comes natural to me. And that's how you develop a unique voice. That's how you develop a unique prose, a unique story that comes from that. I'll give you an example of this. I remember when I was writing my military game tech fiction novel, Series and Limbic, my debut novel, one of the things that I scrutinized pretty heavily in my own writing, self scrutinized, was putting too much history into my my novel, into my fiction. Now, I'm a big fan of history. I'm of learning about history. I love reading about it. I just love placing myself in the context of human events that have come before me. I do this all the time when I travel, when I read. I just really enjoy it. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoy languages. And so I always have this urge to, explain the history and put it in and give it in context. And of course, in the context of the story, I'm not just putting history in to put it in. Anyway, I found that happening on a recent chapter that I was writing for Gates of Okinawa. If you read the third chapter of the novel, by the way, if you do join the Digital Novelist Explorer, I'm also doing a special thing. This is a very hidden thing, but I'm actually publishing the novel on Wattpad, and you'll be able to have access to it through there. So I'll be, yeah, just one more thing with that. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. If you read that chapter, there's a lot of history. There's the first few pages is just me explaining, giving context to Okinawa and the history of Okinawa, and it covers a lot of ground. It covers a couple of centuries of time. And the reason why is I want Okinawa to actually be like a character in this novel. I don't want it to just be a backdrop like in a play. I want the characters to interact with it. I want them to feel it. It just, and because that's what I felt when I was there. It felt like it was its own presence. It was its own thing. Anyway, I want to keep this short because I don't want this to go over time. But what about you? Is there something that you like to write that you feel like, oh, it's not commercial or it won't sell or whatever? Fuck that. Just put it in. It's your style. And if people don't like it, then they won't read it. But maybe they will. I know in Three Body Problem, if you read those novels, there's a lot of history and science just straight up. And it's kind of dry at times where he's just explaining how space works, the history of this, and blah, blah, blah. It can be very dry, but it's a really important part of that story because it sets context and it does other things. So I'm gonna cut this podcast off here. This episode. I hope you enjoyed it. What did you think of my writing process? What is your writing process like? Do you have to put the tea on, or you get a cup of coffee, music? What do you do? Let me know in the comments, and I'd love to hear from you. Once again, the Digital Novelist Explorer package, you're going to get all the stuff that I mentioned, and you're going to get early access to this novel, Gates of Okinawa. You're going to be able to read it in real time as I'm putting out chapters, and I'm working on it every day to hopefully get it done in the time that I need to get it done. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but I sure as hell am going to try. Thanks for listening to this episode. And before I go, I'd like to give a shout out to all the people that have supported me: Joey, Robert, Philippe, Jerry, JC, my boy, my old roommate from college, and Nina over there in Okinawa. Thank you so much, all of you, for just supporting me as I'm growing my presence online and helping more people write their stories. I'll see you next time.